Are you interested in purchasing a replica diecast similar to the one that Todd Kid used to win this year's Ajax 200, the one that defending champion Cameron Atwood used to win the first night race at Disney, the one that Todd Kid used to win his 10th milestone Ajax Cup victory at Belltown, or the one that Laquon Scransen used to win under the lights in the Ajax All-Star race? Well, if you are, you're in luck. Head on over to Circle B Diecast Plan B Sales and use coupon code ASCA on any orders $20 or more to acquire free shipping at checkout.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode to recap all the action that just went down in the Mile High City. Very fun weekend of racing, especially when we're getting this late in the season. It's all about the championship. It's all about big picture. It's all about points. And the intensity just continues to ramp up as the races continue to tick down. We're getting closer and closer to the end of the season. We only got 5 races left in Cup, 4 races left in Craftsman, which is crazy considering we're much closer to the finale in Belltown on June 19th than we are to Speed Weeks and the Ajax 200 that kicked off the 10th Modern Era Ajax Cup campaign on February 27th. But obviously, a ton of storylines to cover from all the action at Denver. An incredible performance from one of the sport's most promising young talents. A huge, huge feud that we need to go over, talking about all of the predicaments from that. The state of the championship battle. We have 5 races remaining in the Ajax Cup season, so what's going to happen here? Then we also got to talk about the Craftsman Series championship battle and that moving on to Ajax Super Speedway. And we're going to preview that entire weekend, as well as going over the huge Ronnie Woods Motorsports press conference. And obviously one of the biggest stars the Craftsman Series has ever seen, finally getting his break at the Cup level. But first off, before we get into any of it, we got to shout out the ASCA's premier partners, as always, Rowdy Energy, Circle B Diecast, and at Paint Scheme Stalker on Instagram. Shout out to the people that help keep this series running. And be sure, of course, to use coupon code ASCA for free shipping on any orders $20 or more at checkout for Circle B Diecast. I'm sure you want to cop a replica diecast similar to that Laquon Scransen used to drive from 17th to 1st in the Ajax Cup race last Saturday afternoon. So you want to do that, head on over, Circle B Diecast, Plan B Sales. You know what to do. You know the coupon code. You know you want free shipping inside the U.S. only, for that matter. But y'all know what to do when it comes to all of that. So that's enough hubbub, enough building this up. Let's get into it. And we got a lot to cover here, as I mentioned previously. So we're going to start with the man of the hour, Laquon Scransen. And literally nobody was talking about the 42 as a potential, contender, a threat to win this weekend. I really didn't hear any talk in the garage area. I really didn't hear any chatter on social media. All eyes were on Cameron Atwood and Chris Barrymore, considering they had won 3 out of the 4 Coors Light 175 races in the past, and we'll get into them in just a second. But all eyes were on them. Maybe Todd Kid, he qualified on pole position. Maybe Nick Orchidi, he was starting towards the front. Diego was starting up there as well. A Ford certainly was a favorite, considering they had won the first 4 races at Denver. So all eyes were on everyone, it seemed like, except for Laquon Scransen, especially after he qualified 17th in qualifying. Really poor qualifying effort. I think one of the worst of the season for this 42 camp. And obviously, there's a lot of questions when you have a guy that's top 5 in points qualifying that poorly in the field. And Laquan shut those up relatively quickly. Now, granted, he gained three free spots thanks to the lap 1 incident, But, he also made a pass in that time frame, and he restarted 13th on the ensuing restart on about lap 10, and he was just blitzing his way through the field from there, passing cars left and right, made it 3 wide on Braid Bennett and Randall Woods for 6 towards the end of that first long stint before the caution came out for Carson Smith's blown tire. Then his pit crew finally does him a solid. They pick him up a couple spots in the pits, and he moves up to, I believe it was third on the restart because Jared Ayers also received a pit road penalty. It would have been really interesting to see Scranton and Ayers going at it. That would have been the must-see TV that I'm sure everyone was hoping for, but Ayers ended up receiving a pit penalty. He had to go to the rear. That boosted Scranton up to third, and then from there, the rest is history. Scranton really on that next run began using that Chris Barrymore line that he's made so famous here, and that's diamonding the corner. Really sending it in and letting it slide up the track, and then cutting down, getting a big run off the corner, and that's really become a feasible strategy here. Um, if you can't make your car wrap the bottom and you need to find some speed, you need to find a way around the car in front of you. A lot of guys have resorted to, they learned from what Chris Barrymore is so successful at, and that's diamonding the corner. And that really paid off for Scranton. He was able to get right to Nick Rorti's back bumper, kind of nudged him a little bit, really didn't touch him other than that, just nudged him out of the way. That's just no harm, no foul, friendly contact. Rubbin's racing. Nudged him a little bit out of the way, forced him out the track, and slid underneath them. And the rest is history. Once they were side by side, you knew Scranton at the bottom. He had the advantage going down into turn one, and he completed the pass with relative ease. And then he drove off and left the field. Obviously, there was a late caution as well for Randall Woods blowing a right front tire, but you knew especially a late race restart, even any restart, Laquon Scransen is going to be hard to beat. And especially, like I said, a late race restart like that, Scranton just drove away, easily cleared. I believe it was Todd Kid who started outside of him entering turn one. And then once Kid and Ross Jackson got together, which was just a racing deal, I don't think there's going to be any hard feelings between those two after that. That's just hard racing late in the going. You're not going to lift. But once those two got together, the 9 the 88, it was curtains. And yeah, the rest is history. Laquon Scransen drives off, leaves the competition, and at one of the two tracks on the West Coast, the Compton native scores his fourth career victory, the fourth driver to score their second win of 2024 this season, the fourth driver to reach multiple victories in 2024, I should say. And Scranton becomes the youngest driver in ASCA history, not just modern era, but in history, to reach 4 career wins, surpassing Randall Woods' mark of 3 wins at age 21. And mind you, we still have 5 races left. And Scranton won next week's race, the Fastball 200, on a thrilling last lap pass. He scored his first win in the Apple 225. He finished second at West Virginia earlier this season. So do not count out this 42 team to really make a run at this championship, man. I think that if they can catch a break, which is basically a Diego DNF at this point, or just a rough run from that team, who they had kind of their first kind of off day, I would say, since Ajax, finishing 10th. But Arkady was 7th, and then he had the pit penalty, but he was still able to break his way into the top 10, and that's 10 straight top 10s for Diego. And we're going to talk more about the championship in a bit, but Laquan now sits third in the point standings. He's 30 back of Diego, only 9 back of Shade Park, though, in second. So I'm just saying, do not count out this 42 team just yet. They can definitely make a run at it. They have some tracks that really bode well for them. I think the Stoneyard and Belltown are the two kind of toss-up tracks for Scranson has been hit or miss at both of them, but I definitely think that Ajax, he won the Fastball 200 last season. Computer, he's had a ton of success there throughout his ASCA career, and then West Virginia, like I said, he finished second there earlier this season. So, man, getting hot at the right time, I think you could certainly say that about Laquon Scransen, Dexter Andrews Motorsports, and all those boys, man. They're really going to give Diego and Shane Park and the rest of these guys, Todd Kid, a run for their money um, in the closing stages of 2024. Now, moving on to discussing last week's winner and one of Laquan Scransen's biggest rivals getting together, and that would be teammates at TJ Barrymore Racing, Cameron Atwood and Chris Barrymore. And boy, oh boy, I think this feud has officially reached a boiling point. I think we've seen this brewing for quite some time, especially I would say after the All-Star race last season, where Barrymore gained quite a bit of confidence, out dueling Atwood at the end, and really making him, kind of feel like he could go toe to toe with the future, Cup Series champion that year. And it certainly had to sting, I think, for Barrymore to go winless while your teammate wins a modern era record 5 races in a season, and of course wins the championship as well. That has to sting, seeing him in victory lane over and over and over and over and over again. And here you are, struggling to put together a top 10 finish. And that kind of boiled over in the off season with some of the comments that Chris Barrymore made about, not wanting to be a number 2 driver, and kind of implying that there's an equipment disparity at CBR, and that he's not going to stand for this. And then we saw these two go at it in the air as 200 earlier in the campaign with that thrilling finish they both put on. Atwood really sent it into the final corner. Obviously it didn't stick, and Barrymore crossed him over and went on to win the race. But Barrymore was really pissed about that move because he thought it was awfully reckless from his teammate, and just thought it didn't need to happen. And that, if Barrymore wasn't so cognizant that Atwood would probably try something there, they could have both end up wrecked, which is a good point. But it kind of seemed a little pissy on his part at the end, especially considering he did end up winning the race, and they did end up, finishing 1-2. It's just kind of, it's the last lap. Like, why wouldn't you send it? It just kind of seemed like a racing deal. But this, now that we hear the reports from Jake Dwyer that the relationship, I should say, between these two is basically unrepairable at this point, borderline unrepairable. I believe that was the exact quote or something similar to that, like they might not come back from this. Monday morning team meeting is not going to solve this problem. And the problem that has arisen, I should say, for CJ Barrymore Racing is they have both Atwood and Barrymore under contract through 2026 minimum. Barrymore's under contract through 2026. Atwood's under contract through 2027. And you got Atwood, he's going to receive a massive raise next season from $5 to $12 million a season. Barrymore is, of course, already making $11 million a season, and his contract runs through 2026. So they're paying these two drivers elite level money. And you cannot have them both wreck on the opening lap of the race and finish 22nd and 23rd. Yeah, that's ridiculous. But that B, you're paying these two drivers to be elite for you, and here they are beefing and feuding. I highly doubt there is like teammates throughout the rest of the season. And it really makes me wonder, like, okay, well, what's the deal here? How are they going to settle this? If the relationship is borderline unrepairable at this point, then what are you going to do? I I cannot see a future where these two are still in the same organization through the end of their contracts. And the question is for CJ Barrymore Racing, who do you keep? Do you keep your son, who you and Ford have invested so much money into over the years? I mean, he has 20 ASCA victories, 5 Ajax Cup wins, 15 Craftsman Series wins. He's the former Craftsman Series champion, former All-Star Race winner. Like, Barrymore has had a relatively solid Cup career to date. He's only 26 years of age, will be 27 next year. Or do you keep the reigning champion? The guy who just won 5 races last season, has won 2 this year, has completely resurrected what was a dormant 17 team that had just gone MIA for like the past 3 years. Caleb Henderson Jr. Atwood has taken that team right back to the top of the leaderboard week in and week out, outside of this year where he's just been unlucky to say the least. Like, who do you keep? Do you choose your son, nepotism, or do you choose the defending champion? And even though you could call it nepotism, Barrymore has a case. He's had a solid career so far. And we all know the talent, the raw talent that the kid possesses. He's dominated so many races, and he probably deserves a lot more wins than 5. He just has had a tough time closing the deal. So it's a toxic situation at CJ Barrymore Racing, and I don't envy the owner, ASCA legend CJ Barrymore, trying to decide what are we going to do here and trying to get these two drivers to kind of calm down. And it's I don't know how they're going to resolve this, honestly, but I think that this move, if they can't resolve it, I can certainly see, I don't know, just because of the contract situation, I I don't know, they're gonna have to resolve it, because it's not like Barrymore can just walk out of his contract now, especially this late in the season. Like, everyone's pretty much has their 2024 plans kind of finalized or almost finalized, ready to announce. Like we just talked about Roddy Woods Motorsports, they just announced their 2024 lineup. Um, there's few other teams that are set to announce theirs in the coming weeks. Like, everyone's plans are pretty much finalized at this point. So it's not like Barrymore can just leave, opt out of his contract and go sign for another team, like that. No, like, all the contracts are finalized. So it's a tough situation. We'll see if they're able to mend the relationship, but I'd say watch the 17 and the 21 very closely throughout the rest of the season. I think that's really going to be an underrated story throughout the remainder of 2024 to see how those two race each other, to say the least. Then it's time to look at the state of the Ajax Cup championship chase. All right. So we have 5 races to go. Now, obviously, the schedule's been jumbled up tremendously from what it normally is. Like, normally, Ajax Super Speedway is the penultimate round in the campaign. But, now it's the upcoming race this week with 5 to go. Then we got the Northern 200. Then the Apple 225 at Computer Motor Speedway. And then it's the West Banco 250, the second longest race. That's the new penultimate round of the season at West Virginia. And then, of course, the Ajax season finale under the lights at Belltown. So looking at the schedule and kind of the faces that we're looking at in this title fight right now, I'd still say advantage Diego, especially with Ajax this week. He's won there 3 times, which is the most of any active driver, except for the fact that Dan Rogers is coming back into the ASCA this weekend, which is shocking in and of itself. We're going to talk about that much later in the podcast when it comes to our preview and predictions of the Ajax Super Speedway weekend. But yeah, Dan Rogers returning definitely throws some monkey wrench into it. But even still, I would consider Diego the favorite with the success he's had at Ajax Super Speedway in recent years. Um, Shane Park has had really a mixed bag here, but hasn't really done too much at Ajax, especially since joining Ronnie Woods Motorsports. Todd Kid, another guy with kind of a mixed history here. He did win the Ajax 200 earlier this season, so he is the most recent winner at Ajax. But I, I still have a really hard time thinking that he's going to be able to duplicate that. And it's nothing against him or his car or anything like that. It's just like, when does your luck run out? And the same could be said for Laquon Scransen. Like, I have a hard time believing he's going to be able to duplicate that. His win in the Fastball 200 from last season. And, for a kid, he's finished second and first in the last two plate races. Just realized that, which is very interesting. But then you look back at the Ajax 200 last season and he DNF'd. So it's again, like, it's such a toss up with the way plate racing works, especially these days with this package. It's really tough to be continuously competitive and up there at the front in these plate races. It's really a toss up. I really think any of the 25, 26 drivers entered in this race could win, even the part-time ones like a Jack Alaus, like a Noah Davis, this year Circle K 200 winner, or a Dan Rogers, you know, two-time Ajax 200, where the only two-time winner in history. It's so it could go anyone's way. And then, of course, down the stretch, the Northern 200, that's another track that I think favors Diego very much. We all know his track record at the Stone Yard, 6 wins there. Todd Kid has a win at the Stone Yard and came very close to winning the Northern 200 a couple years ago, as did Diego Urquidy, but we all know what happened there. Then kind of moving on to Computer Motor Speedway, I'd say that's an advantage of Laquon Scransen for sure. But Diego, again, no slouch at, in that race. He's led laps in the Apple 225 the past 2 seasons, has just come up short though. And then he finished second there in 2021. And, so I think he'll be right up at the front of that race as well. Um, then moving on to West Virginia, well, Diego's the all-time wins leader there as well. And he won there earlier this season. He's won the last 2 races at West Virginia, to be exact. So that's another one that it's like, man. And then Belton, I think, is the only one where you can kind of point to a Todd Kid and say, out of the championship contenders, out of the top 4, I'd give him the best shot to win at Belltown, considering he did win there earlier this year. But Diego finished 6th, so he's no slouch there. It's his home track after all. He's had top 5 runs there before, just has kind of struggled to stay out of trouble in recent times. So, I'd still say, especially with the 21-point cushion he has, Diego has the inside track to the championship, number 4. Certainly, I'd be shocked if he DNS Ajax, I wouldn't be shocked, but after that, really, these next 4 weeks, I'd be shocked if he didn't finish out the last quarter of the season strong. And even though Park and Scranson and Kidd and all these other guys are going to be throwing everything they have in the kitchen sink at that number 22, I mean, the guy has won 25 cup races and 3 championships for a reason. He's the highest paid driver in the sport for a reason. Man, like, all eyes, all scenarios, I think, point to Diego Urquidy winning his record-tying 4th championship. But I don't know. That's just me. Maybe I'm looking status quo. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough. We'll see. We're going to find out for sure in about a month's time if Diego can pull it off or whether he will finally be toppled at the top of the standings. But moving on to the Craftsman Series championship battle, that is, I would say, much more of an open discussion between Colin Ward and Graham Doherty. Those are the top 2, but I certainly would not count Marcus Edwards and especially Sean Warden out. Warden has won 2 of the last 3 Citibank 100 runnings at Ajax Super Speedway. So certainly cannot count out the 12 car. And he was second in this race in 2022 before being dumped in turn 3 by Blake Stern after no time block and actually getting credit for like a 19th place finish or whatever. But basically, point being, Sean Warden is a hell of a plate racer. So don't count him out. Certainly, I would say Marcus Edwards tends to have some speed in qualifying. So if he qualifies up front, who knows, maybe he can keep that track position. And then if you look at the top two, I think there's a distinct advantage for Colin Ward over Graham Darty. Darty only has one start at Ajax Super Speedway, and he was caught up in the last lap melee in the season opener, a few months ago. Was up there for a little bit. I think he got as high as second, but then, obviously kind of faded towards the end and got caught up in that wreck. Meanwhile, Colin Ward, in his 3 Craftsman Series Ajax Super Speedway starts, he has finished first, 5th, leading the most laps, and first. This is his home track, mind you, and he has a top 5 average finish at Ajax Super Speedway, which is absolutely unheard of. And then if you look at his Cup debut in the Ajax 200 earlier this season, he finished 10th, got a top 10 finish in his Cup debut. So he just knows his way around here like a glove. Like his track record here is impeccable. And I definitely think it's advantage Ward, certainly. But, how much of an advantage do you really have at Ajax Super Speedway? This is just such an unpredictable racetrack. We were headed to the Stone Yard or to Advocare or to Belltown, which are the 3 races remaining in the Craftsman season after this, then I would say, yeah, a distinct advantage. That means a lot at those tracks, but a distinct advantage at Ajax is more so about kind of putting yourself in a good spot and putting yourself in the right place at the right time. And that's what Ward has been able to do in his 3 starts here. I would say he's been able to do that, a fantastic job at that, and all the props in the world to him for his 2 wins. But, they both his 2 wins came on last lap passes. Like, how often can you really replicate that? Sure, you can replicate laps led and qualifying on pole position. And I'm sure, Ward will probably have one of the fastest cars here on raw pace. Ronnie Woods Motorsports always tends to do so, especially, on the Cup side of things. But when it comes to race pace and race conditions in this pack racing style, restrictor plate racing format, you're really kind of just along for the ride and hoping you're not caught up in anyone else's mess. So it's kind of a cross your fingers race for Colin Ward. I certainly think that if he qualifies well, potentially, let's say, pole position, he leads some laps early, or maybe he has a dominant car. I certainly think he's going to have a big opportunity to take advantage of Graham Darty and kind of pull away in this championship. But who knows? Anything could happen in this race. So this is another one that's a toss up, especially with the fact that there's only 2 Cup drivers in this race, and that would be kind of younger guys at the Cup level, and Braden Bennett and Carson Smith, who don't have that much plate racing experience. It's really kind of a toss up as to who's going to come out victorious on the other side of this one. But I would say that if there is an odds-on favorite heading into the Citibank 100 this Friday night, it certainly does have to be Colin Ward. Absolutely no doubt about it. And I mean, it sounds like he's the freaking odds-on favorite everywhere, but look at his freaking track record and you'll see why, that is said about him. So then, speaking of Colin Ward, the inevitable ended up happening a little bit earlier today as Ronnie Woods Motorsports announced that Colin Ward will be the successor to Britton Renard in the number 48, signing a 3-year, $15 million contract to drive that ride through the 2027 campaign. And all you have to do is say well-deserved. Really, we all kind of saw this coming once Ronnie Woods cut bait with Bryn Renard very, very early in the season. And props to Ronnie for doing that, by the way, because it gave Renard, he kind of knew, we all knew this was inevitable with the rise of Colin Ward last season, but Ronnie wanted to give him another season in Craftsman. I think he handled this entire situation brilliantly. Didn't rush Ward up to Cup because he knew he had a veteran in the ride who can take care of business. And then, once he knew that Ward was ready with the way he started this season, he pulled the trigger on Renard and told him, hey, we're ready to move in a different direction. We're going to give you fair warning very early in the season, well in advance. You can spend the entire rest of the year kind of proving yourself and, marking up your asking price on the open market, basically. And it's going to be very interesting to see who wins the Bryn Renard sweepstakes. Right now, it seems like it's between not Ronnie Woods Motorsports. He's been there since 2012, but it seems like it's between Taylor Motorsports and Michael White Racing. So very interested to see who ends up coming out with an Ajax 200, Windows 300, and Northern 200 winner heading into the 2025 campaign. But this was a no-brainer. Hire Colin Ward to number 48. Is anyone surprised by this? I mean, if you are, you've been living under a rock. This has been pretty much set in stone. Like I said, we all kind of saw this one coming. And like I said, it's well deserved. Absolutely 100% well deserved. I mean, 6 Craftsman Series wins in 2 years is unheard of, man. 3 as a rookie and a championship, and then you come back and win 3 out of the first 6 this season. Mind you, all of those races that he won, Colin Ward won, featured Cup drivers in them. No standalone victories. He beat the best of the best when they were in the field racing against him. So you can't even hold standalone victory, all that stuff. You can't even hold that against him, man. He's a special talent. He really is. And I cannot wait to see what he does in the 48 because I think he could really set the top level of this sport on fire, especially considering he's an older rookie at 23 years of age. Sounds weird saying a 23-year sounds weird saying that a 23-year-old is old, but it is in ASCA terms, especially when you consider who Ward is competing against at the top level. At the Craftsman level for the championship, an 18-year-old Graham Doherty. But can't wait to see how Ward does in Cup. It's really going to be something else to watch him go at it with the big boys full time. And then Colin Ward's successor in the number 9 was also announced. Caleb Moore, the son of FSCS legend Andy Moore, will be taking over that ride next season. 19 years of age from Savannah, Georgia. I am really interested to see how Moore does. There's been a lot of praise, obviously, from his dad and how he's learned a lot from his father in terms of racing savvy and racing skill. And if he races anything like his father does on Thursday nights, I think he could really be special in the ASCA and could really kind of pick up where Colin Ward left off, terrorizing the Craftsman Series for years to come. But very, very interesting hire, I think, for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, but it's a good one. It really is. And I think they made the right decision here. It seemed like it was between Moore and Matt Chamberlain for that number 9 entry, and they went with Moore. So really interesting to see them go with Moore, but I think they made the right decision. And certainly can't wait to see how he does in the Craftsman level full time. He's got no ASCA starts under his belt, only tons of time in the simulator these past couple of years, kind of learning, taking notes from Colin Ward and Will Moon and Toby Beckett and all those guys, and learning and soaking in all the knowledge that he can on the sidelines. But being in the simulator and driving the car itself on the racetrack on Friday afternoons is two completely different things. So very interested to see how Moore does in 2025. It's gonna be fun kind of seeing a fresh face in that number 9 and seeing if he can truly pick up the slack and continue that Ronnie Woods Motorsports Craftsman dominance that we have seen over the course of the past couple seasons. Now, one other thing to cover that went down in the Ronnie Woods Motorsports press conference is Shane Park signed a 2-year, $22 million extension. So he receives a raise to actually be making more money than Todd Kid this season. And his contract is extended through the 2027 campaign. This is another well-deserved extension. I think it's safe to say that Park deal, that 3-year, $30 million contract that Park signed, I don't think they paid him enough. Honestly, like that was a bargain looking back at it and considering, what guys like Jared Ayers and Chris Barrymore and some of these others are making. Like that was a bargain, honestly. And Park is really starting to show what he can do in the right situation, in the right equipment to succeed with everything around him to ensure that he reaches his full potential and shows off his true talents. And he really has. He has certainly earned every last penny of that $10 million a year salary. And shout out to him. Shout out to the kid from New York. And, we were kind of not sold on him after his really, really rough rookie season. I think, if I recall correctly, he finished behind like Nick Painter and Nathaniel Cherry in the 2019 Craftsman Series standings. And he's come from that to a Craftsman Series championship to being kind of under the radar his first 2 years in Cup and Greg Healy's shadow and Stoots Enterprises. And now he's second in points, 2 career wins to his name, could very well score another one before this year's over. Fortunately, no more road courses for him because he is, I think it's safe to say that it's kind of a toss-up between himself and Scranson for who's the best road racer in the sport right now. But he's only 23 years old. That's the crazy part about it. And this contract will take him through 2027, when he'll be 26 and really starting to crack his full potential. And again, 2 career wins already. I think the sky's the limit for this kid, man. I really do. Really kind of getting him in Ronnie Woods Motorsports equipment has proven. Not to say that Stoots Enterprise has really held him back, but just what he can do when he's given everything around him to succeed. So congrats to Park, congrats to Ward, congrats to Moore on their big announcements in this Ronnie Woods Motorsports press conference. And definitely going to be interesting to see how they all perform in 2025, man. Especially for Park, he still got a chance to win a championship here in 2024. So we'll see if he can finish out the season strong now that he's got that fresh new contract extension. That's going to be fun for him. Now we can move on to previewing Ajax Super Speedway. Like I mentioned earlier, this is not the penultimate round of the season anymore. It's this weekend. We run some races under the lights for Craftsman and Cup, the Citibank 100, and the Fast and All 200. And we've kind of talked about all the major storylines, except for the Dan Rogers spanner in the works. Rogers coming back from the Smithfield Cup Series and running this one-off for Flores Motorsports. Mind you, they paid him $500,000 to run this race. 500 bands. That's as much money as they paid Lucas Sambert for the full season in 2022 and 2023. They paid Rogers $500,000 to run this race. Why? Because they wanted his plate racing expertise to kind of learn what to do, what not to do on these plate tracks, And, even at 43 years of age, Dan has proven that he still has it. He still has that fire in him to compete. And I think that, had Michael Wright Racing not ditched him back in 2020 for Devin Smith, I think he'd still be racing in the ASCA today. Honestly, he loves racing that much. He really does. He eats, he breathes, he sleeps, racing, 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 24/7, 365, no days off for the 14-time Ajax Cup Series winner. Obviously, is a 2-time Ajax 200 winner, 3-time Ajax Super Speedway winner in the modern era, I do believe. And at the track that nearly took his life a decade ago is the crazy part about it. We nearly lost him a decade ago. Had that basilar skull fracture, but was able to make a full recovery back for 2015, and he's conquered it 3 more times since. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he does in that number 96. Brett Will was super competitive in that ride, in the Ajax 200 throughout speed weeks. So going to be very interesting to see how he does in that ride, and very interesting to see what kind of impact he has on the race. But I think for the Craftsman Series, it's picks time. And Craftsman Series, I literally pick him every single week. But come on now, he has a sub fifth place average finish at his home track. Did you really think I wasn't going to pick Colin Ward? Come on now. Come on now. I don't overthink stuff like this. Easy pick for me. Colin Ward. Not even a question. Ajax Cup, completely different. It's a toss-up. It really could be anyone. But actually looking at the leaderboard and looking at what Todd Kid has done in his past few starts here, I'm going to pick the number 9. I am going to pick Todd Kid to win under the lights at Ajax Super Speedway and sweep the season here, which would be shocking if he does. Like I said earlier, he's finished second in the Fast Fallen 200 last season. He won his duel, starting dead last after an engine change. And then he comes out, leads 55 laps, dominates the Ajax 200. So, from all indications, Todd Kidd has been the hottest super speedway racer in the sport for the past year, at least for the past 2 times that we've been here. So my money's on Todd Kidd to win, and he needs it for the championship. It'd be huge if he could score his 4th win of the season like that. We'll see if he's able to get the job done, but man, it'd be huge. I think that would really definitely put him back in the championship hunt if he can get the job done. That'd be a huge championship statement, to say the least, especially if there's another DNF for Diego Urquidy. We will see. We shall see. But that is it for this edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. Boy, oh boy, I cannot wait to be back on here and recap all the action that we're going to get at Ajax Super Speedway, because I guarantee you there's going to be a ton of it. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the 2 of you still watching or listening to this all the way through. Shout out once again to the ASCA's premier partners and Rowdy Energy, Plan B Sales, and at Paint Scheme Stalker on Instagram, Circle B Diecast. And yeah, this is Charles Fallon signing out. We'll see you once again in a week's time.